Welcome, everyone. I think everyone knows me. Just in case you don't, I'm Dr. Douglas Dow. I'm the Associate Dean of the Hobson-Wildenthal Honors College. I am also the Director of our university's Office of Distinguished Scholarships, and I have been in charge of our university's Marshall Scholarship Program, as well as a number of other scholarship programs, for going on 14 years now. And what I'd like to do today is, first of all, present to you a number of slides presented to us by the Marshall. And I'll sort of begin to fill in information about, well, what is a Marshall Scholarship? Why might it be interesting? Who might it be interesting for? I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to really be laying out a whole bunch of information, and then when I get done with that in about a half hour to 35 minutes, then I'm going to open it up for questions, and we can be taking questions in the chat box, but I'm also happy to be having you do your virtual hand raise and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question as you would like. So please, by all means, take notes. Take notes on questions that you may have. I may be answering them in the course of our conversation. But if not, I will have Q&A at the very end. So Ms. Kavanaugh will be helping me with the PowerPoint slide. So let me just start off. The Marshall Scholarship. What is the Marshall Scholarship? The Marshall Scholarship is designed for recent graduates with a bachelor's degree to have an opportunity to go and study in the United Kingdom in any one of the over 75 different colleges and universities within the United Kingdom. That's England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland for 2 years. As we'll see, there is a 1-year Marshall that's available, and there are options for being a Marshall Scholarship for 3 years. But the basic idea of the Marshall Scholarship is that you spend 2 years right after you've graduated from college getting master's level education at a British university. Part of the purpose of the Marshall Scholarship is to advertise and show off the absolutely first-class, amazing British universities that are available. We all know about Oxford, Cambridge, London School of Economics, Imperial College London, but there are a lot of other lesser-known universities within the United Kingdom that are absolutely wonderful and perfect, with programs that are perfect fits for a variety of students. And part of the Marshall Scholarship is to get students looking at some of those scholarship opportunities. So that's kind of what the Marshall offers to students, as well as a number of other things we'll be talking about. If we can go to the next photo. So who are Marshall Scholars? Marshall Scholars are designed to represent the full diversity of students in the United States, college students in the United States. So just a couple of slides here. We can have the next slide. Marshall Scholarships are given out to individuals in all walks of life. This is not just for people that are going into science. This is not simply for people going into law or to public service. This is a broad range in which any number of different long-term career paths, as soldiers, advocates, innovators. If we can do the next slide. Community leaders, musicians, authors. We have a wide range of individual career paths for Marshall Scholars. So part of what that means is a diverse community. It is an absolutely diverse community there. That is last year's group of Marshall Scholars. If we had gotten a photograph of the year before, it would have included UTD's own alumna, Nancy Fairbank, who 2 years ago wrapped up her own 2 years in the United Kingdom as a Marshall Scholar. Part of what these slides indicate is that the question of fittedness for a Marshall Scholar does not depend upon what your long-term academic or career goals are. It encompasses the widest variety of long-term goals and interests. What does it mean to be fitted for a Marshall Scholar? We'll get to that. A little bit of history here. The Marshall Scholarship is one of our oldest distinguished scholarships, established in 1953 as a recognition of the unique relationship that the United States and the United Kingdom have had with each other. Obviously, a relationship that extends back to the days of American colonialism, but a relationship that was, in a sense, shown its most modern and essential form during the Second World War. And it's for that reason that the scholarship was named after General George Marshall, who also established the Marshall Aid Program to help revitalize the democracies of Europe in the wake of the Second World War. Part of what that means is the Marshall Scholarship has been around a long time. It is a scholarship that has changed, evolved, and broadened its scope. I would say about 40 years ago, the Marshall Scholarship was not necessarily competitive to all college students, but really was sort of the monopoly of a small number of well-known elite schools. That is not the case anymore. The Marshall Scholarship, as colleges and universities in America have changed, grown, diversified, and democratized, and become more egalitarian, so too has the Marshall Scholar. Okay, I'm going on to the next slide. One of the major questions when you're thinking about any scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship or anything else, is of course the question of baseline eligibility. What criteria do I need to be within in order to be capable of even applying for a Marshall Scholarship? So here in this slide that you see, we have laid out the basic eligibility requirement. You must be a U.S. citizen at the time that you apply. Your application is going to be due for this cycle on September the 25th, 2020. That's a Friday. At that date, you must be a U.S. citizen. I worked a couple of years ago with a Marshall applicant who actually became a Marshall finalist, who had become a U.S. citizen just 2 weeks before that deadline. It was we were sort of on the razor's edge, hoping for word. But you must be a U.S. citizen. You can be a dual citizen, but you must be a U.S. citizen by the 25th of September. You must have a GPA of 3.7 or higher at the time of graduation, or if you are a rising senior, at the time that you are applying in the fall of 2020. If you chose not to have any grades, but just credit, no credit for the spring, then your GPA as of fall 2019 will control this GPA requirement of a 3.7. You need to be a Marshall Scholar with a bachelor's degree. So you need to be graduating either this fall, this spring, or this summer. And for those alumni who may be applying, you must have graduated sometime after April of 2018. So there's a small window primarily, the Marshall Scholarship is applied for by rising seniors as something that they want to be able to begin to do right after they've graduated from college. But there is a couple of years where you can, as a recent alumna of a university, that you can be applying. You cannot have studied or held a degree or degree equivalent qualification from any British university. They want you to be an American coming as a foreign student to the UK. Now, that does not mean that if you studied abroad for a semester or a summer that you are ineligible. You are not ineligible. That is not a problem. If you have received credits on your UTD transcript for a study abroad program that you may have done in the UK while an undergraduate here, that is not at all disqualifying. It's not necessarily looked on as a good thing or a bad thing. It is simply something that is not disqualifying. So for those of you who may have done a summer program at Oxford or done a semester at another British university, not going to be a problem for you. Okay, let's move on. In your application, you have two options. Everyone applies for a region, and the competition for a Marshall Scholarship is actually a regional competition. You can either apply for the Houston region, which is the home region of the University of Texas at Dallas, which would be your undergraduate institution, or you can apply in the region of your permanent address. So if you are from another city in another region, and that's where your family is, that's where your permanent address is, you can make that choice. The reality is that the competition level in all of these regions are essentially the same. There's no really way in which you can try to play the system by choosing a less competitive region, because everyone's doing that who are in different schools, and basically all regions are going to be equally competitive. The primary determination for those who are not from Texas or the outlying states, who are not from the Houston region, for determining whether you choose Houston or another region, was where do you want to do your interview if you are a finalist, because interviews are done at the British consulate in the cities that you see there. I believe, and I apologize, I was not able to triple check, but I believe that the Marshall Scholarship has announced that they are doing their interviews, which they will be doing in late October and early November, that they will be doing them virtually, that you will not, in other words, be flying out to these cities. So that question, that problem is not going to be around for this cycle. Okay, next slide. Application components. The application for a Marshall Scholarship is pretty significant. This is a distinguished scholarship. It is one of the most well-known major scholarships in the world, not just in the United States. And so we've got a number of essays that they want, as well as some short answers. You're going to need to be submitting your official transcripts. You're going to need to have 3 letters of recommendation. And I want a little bit later in our talk, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about the 3 letters of recommendation. It used to be 4. This is one of the major changes of this year. You're only getting 3 letters of recommendation, which on the one hand makes it easier to get those letters because you're asking 3, not 4 people. But it is also, from my perspective, it makes the application more difficult because you're losing one other person who could have been talking about your intellectual persona, speaking persuasively about your fittedness for this application. So 3 letters of recommendation, not 4. But we also, could we go back to that? Just one moment, thank you. But you're also going to need, and this is significant, a university endorsement. Um, we have a limited number of applications that can be coming out of UTD. Luckily, the number is 24. I can tell you, University of Texas at Dallas will not be having 24 applicants. So we don't have to have internal competition like we do for some scholarships where, say, we're only able to have 4 official nominees. But an official university endorsement that is not merely a checkbox, but a fulsome letter of endorsement covering the entire application must come out of this university. That university endorsement is produced by the Hobson Wildenthal Honors College. It comes out of our office, and it is ultimately drafted and signed by the Honors College Dean, Dr. Edward Harpham. Part of what that means is that Dr. Harpham will never be one of your 3-letter writers because he's writing the university endorsement, but that is something that you must have. Students cannot, in other words, apply directly for a Marshall application or Marshall Scholarship. You apply to your university, and your university then forwards on the application along with a university endorsement. I can talk more during the Q&A about that, but that's a significant thing to know. Many scholarships don't require university endorsements. Some do. This one definitely does. Okay, next slide. Couple of changes for the 2021 competition. Every year, scholarships usually sort of rejigger their application cycle a little bit. One key thing is, as I've said, 3 letters of recommendation, not 4 are required. You need to have one individual identified as your preferred recommender. That is a designated recommender. It is going to be somebody who is a faculty member at this university, but somebody who can speak not just to how you're doing in class, not just to your academic excellence and achievements, but to your overall fittedness for this application. So this is where, when I talk to students about having faculty mentors and the need to have faculty mentors, this is where that requirement really sort of comes to a head. You're going to need to find a faculty member that can speak broadly and fulsomely, not just about your classroom and academic capacities, but also your capacity for many of the other aspects of fittedness for this program, including your leadership capacities, including your ambassadorial potentials. You're going to need to have one general but likely academic letter, and then one that's going to be focused on your leadership, a topic that I'll get to. A number of the essays are actually shorter this year. Your personal statement is shorter than it was in years before, as well as your future plans. That doesn't make the application easier. It makes it harder because it means that you're going to need to be a little bit more concise in your ideas and what you're trying to be conveying. So we've got some shorter forms. We have one less letter. The entire application is going to be a little leaner, a little bit less fulsome. There's some more personal information you're going to need to be doing. Here's one thing I want to draw your attention to. There's going to be a new question, a short answer question of 150 words, talking about the impact of COVID-19, the impact of the quarantines, the shutdowns, the going virtual on classes, going virtual on research, going virtual on internships. All of this has been challenges for you, for me, for everyone. We learn a lot about individuals by how they react to challenges such as this, things that just fall into your lap and you didn't want them, you didn't predict them, you didn't ask for them, but you're having to deal with them. And so a number of scholarships, including the Marshall, have been asking direct questions about how have you reacted to COVID-19? How have you creatively adapted to this new environment. And of course, we're going to be looking for answers that aren't just, well, I just sort of soldiered on the best I could. That's acceptable. But we're really looking for an opportunity to show your creativity, your fortitude, your ability to do interesting, creative, intellectually vibrant things, all while adhering to this new world that we are living in which we are no longer able to be meeting and engaging in groups. We're not able to be traveling around the US, traveling around the world. So, new question to be thinking about. And I will definitely, with those applicants I'm going to be working directly with, I will be helping to try to craft narratives of creativity and of leadership in the time of COVID. Okay, next slide. Selection criteria. Let's just linger on this slide for just a moment. Three major criteria. They do not prioritize any of these criteria. They are all significant. The fittedness of your application, the competitiveness of your application for a marshal will be determined by your academic and intellectual merit, your preparedness for being an outstanding student in high-level master's classes in British universities. The Marshall Scholarship is, at its heart, similar to the Fulbright, which I talked about 2 weeks ago, in that both scholarships are scholarships of public diplomacy. They are opportunities within the framework of study, scholarship, and research for people of one country to come and live within the UK, to get to know the people, and to return to the United States, bringing home that knowledge, that interest, that engagement with the UK, an interest and engagement that will, the Marshall Scholarship hopes, last an entire lifetime. You are an unofficial cultural ambassador of the United States in the United Kingdom as a Marshall Scholar. And so they're interested in a lot of the character traits of an ambassador. They're interested in how you would be not just a great scholar, but also an unofficial cultural ambassador. Talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And then we've got what we've talked about a couple of times, this notion of leadership. A lot of scholarships are interested in identifying not just terrific scholars, but also the next generation of leaders. That's a word that is used a lot, maybe overused. Each scholarship means something a little bit different from leadership. So we'll be talking about exactly what does it seem to mean as a concept, as a way of identifying one's intellectual persona for the Marshall. So let's go. We're going to get 3 slides that are going to talk about each of these different selection criteria in turn. So let's go to the next slide. Academic merit. You want to be able to have strong evidence in your GPA through a careful examination of your transcripts, through your own description of your academic plans in the United Kingdom, as well as in the letters of recommendation your letter writers will be giving you. You want to be able to show demonstration that you are going to be an excellent student within these top-ranked master's level programs in the UK. We know that eligibility requirements require at a minimum a 3.7 GPA, but the academic merit is going to be much more nuanced and personally tailored to your discipline, your long-term interests, your particular engagement, your preparedness for the academic program. They're going to be looking at questions such as how carefully is there evidence that the applicant has gone through all of the different programs available in the UK? What is the explanation that the applicant is giving for why this particular program or this particular university would be such a great intellectual fit? What are they going to be doing with this information? What are the post-Marshall career or academic plans? And is there a is there a notion of fittedness? What will you be doing with your education as a Marshall Scholar once you return to the United States? What preparations here at this university as an undergraduate have you received that will make you capable of thriving in this program? So a variety of different ways of thinking about academic merit above and beyond mere GPA. This is a perfect opportunity to really be thinking about your intellectual persona. Next slide. Leadership potential. Leadership can mean many things, and most scholarships acknowledge that leadership can be a wide and broad term describing any number of different character traits. Some scholarships have a very clear and somewhat narrow idea of what a leader is. The Truman Scholarship, for example, believes that leadership means getting people to do things they would not otherwise have done. A real social, interpersonal idea of leadership having to do with getting individuals who may have their own will, their own ideas, their own directedness, and harnessing the energy of people collectively to a single task. The Marshall has a notion of leadership that certainly encompasses that, but I think it's a little bit more broad. A leader is one that is able to deliver results, who is able to do so creatively, to demonstrate a certain amount of risk-taking and courage, but also a level of self-awareness, of integrity and strength of purpose. One of the things that I like about the leadership criteria established by the Marshall is that it allows for leadership characteristics to come to people that may be, honestly speaking, a little bit more introverted. That definition of leadership that the Harry Truman Scholarship has that I define, getting people to do things they would not otherwise do, basically is a leader of someone who comes in a very extroverted way is able to mobilize people. But a lot of people are leaders who are accomplishing things in really creative ways and helping to transform our community, but they're doing it in ways that are more individual, that isn't necessarily coming into a group and banging heads and making people adhere to different deadlines. The ability to deliver results allows each applicant, each scholar, to really think broadly about their agency within a set of communities. And if you're taking notes, I would write that phrase down. Your agency within a variety of different communities of which you're a part. Leadership is showing your effectiveness, the degree to which your communities are transformed because of your actions, your behaviors, your words. Your leadership essay will be an exemplification of your style, your character. So before we move on to the last criteria, I just want to direct your attention to that phrase, self-awareness. One of the things that I think is tough about applying for any scholarship, but oh so valuable, is the degree to which these scholarships are not just asking you, what have you done and what do you want to do, but they're asking you to think about who you are, how you engage with others, how you make your mark and imprint in society, It's requiring a self-awareness of not just what you've done, but how you've done it. It's hard to do. It's hard to, in a realistic way, describe our character. A Marshall application, along with a handful of other distinguished scholarship applications, including the Truman, are absolutely wonderful ways to really learn and become more self-aware about yourself and your intellectual persona. It's something that I work with our applicants quite a bit with as we sort of think about what does leadership mean to me, and how might I think about myself as a leader. Okay, next slide. Ambassadorial potential. I love that phrase, ambassadorial potential. I love it because it turns the idea of being an ambassador into something that is active, is something that is interactive, personal. It speaks to character. It speaks to what I call adverbial considerations. That is how you go about being and with others, talking with others, engaging with others. Part of that means that you are somebody who is curious about others, who wants to learn about other peoples, other cultures, other ways of life, and are able to do so in a way that is open, candid, respectful, but also is one that is a two-way street in which you feel comfortable sharing yourself, engaging with others while you share your own background, your own values, your own ideas, your own cultures. A Marshall Scholar is one that does not remain on the university campus. You go into the community, you go into the cities and the towns in which your university is located, and you are an ambassador even when you are not on your college campus. Part of that means that to write the ambassadorial potential essay, you have to think, what will I do in the United Kingdom during my time there when I'm not in class, when I'm not within the framework of the university communities? What other communities might I want to engage in? What volunteer opportunities might I want to participate in? What type of sports activities? If being an ambassador is sharing of yourself, what are some things that you do right now as a student, as an undergraduate at this university, that may have some level of applicability or transferability into the context of the UK? Um, so these are some of the things to think about. But you are an unofficial representative. You are a cultural ambassador of the United States to the United Kingdom. And that's one thing that they want you to be thinking about, recognizing that, despite all of our ideas of the UK that come from Downton Abbey or Monty Python or what have you, that the United Kingdom is an incredibly dynamic and culturally rich and diverse community that lives in the forefront of the 21st century, and a lot of the ideas of Britishness that come to us through PBS TV series, for examples, are simply heritage light stereotypes that do not reflect the true diversity of the UK today. So, a couple things to be thinking about. Next slide. What's the value of the scholarship? Well, if you sort of aggregate it out, it comes to about $45,000 a year. It basically pays for all of your expenses and allows you to live a comfortable, if not necessarily highfalutin life as a student in the UK, including tuition, airfare to and from the United States, a comfortable living allowance that is recognizing that it's more expensive to live in London than it is to live, say, in York, as well as an allowance for other expenses. One thing I should say here, since we're talking about airfare, um, if you apply for a scholarship this year, you would be starting in the fall of 2021. The assumption is, and I think it's a perfectly fair assumption given that we just don't know the future, the assumption is that you will be flying as a Marshall Scholar to the United Kingdom and spending time in your cities in person on campuses that are open. What the universities look like in the UK in the fall of 2021, we obviously don't know yet. But the expectation and the cycle is that we will be. Next slide. There we go. Thank you. There's a wide variety of different types of Marshall Scholars, or scholarships. The basic and most fundamental Marshall Scholarship is a 2-year scholarship. So that's that middle column. The Marshall Foundation is planning on having about 50 scholarships, 50 scholars for this coming cycle. The vast majority of them are going to be 2-year scholarships. Once you're a 2-year scholar, there is an opportunity to apply for a 3rd-year extension at certain universities. So that is a possibility, but that's a possibility that only comes about once you are designated a Marshall Scholar and you are part of a program at a particular university. There's a 1-year scholarship. There's a very small number of 1-year scholarships that are given out. The number is about 7 or 8 per year. The Marshall program is meant to be a 2-year program, not a 1-year program. They offered a 1-year program because there are a certain number of outstanding applicants who simply cannot afford to spend 2 years in the United Kingdom before they return to take on the next chapter of their life. They're not, that doesn't mean that, well, I want to get back to law school or I'm going to medical school and that's going to take me a long time, so I just don't have time for a 2-year Marshall Scholar. That's not what they're looking for. The example of the 1-year scholarship, and to be perfectly honest, the reason why it was created is individuals who are at service academies, who are going to be commissioning into the United States Armed Forces, for whom the U.S. government will not allow them to be gone for 2 full years before they take up their military commission, so that they are able to do only a 1-year scholarship. So the 1-year scholarship, unless you've got a really absolutely firm, controlling limitation on your ability to spend 2 years, the 1-year scholarship is not for you. It's a 2-year scholarship. You can do 1 2-year master's degree, but most people are seeking a wide variety of experiences in the UK, and they are looking at 2 1-year master's program. So that top choice in the middle column, 2 1-year masters at the same or different universities. I'm going to recommend the different universities. So you are identifying 2 different master's programs at 2 different universities for a 2-year scholarship. I would say that probably 90% or more of the applications that over more than a dozen years working with Marshall applicants, um, probably 90% or more of the applications I've worked with are 2-year scholarships for 2 different universities. And unless there's really good reasons to vary that, that's kind of what I recommend. Next slide. Tips for choosing a university. You need to do your research. There is on the Marshall webpage, there is a guide to studying in the UK that will help you find programs at different universities. But this is a process that for those who are applying for a Marshall, it typically takes a couple of weeks of going online and studying the different programs, studying the different universities, and really showing that you have canvassed all of the different universities quite deeply. A lot of people just instinctually go for Oxford or Cambridge or LSE or a handful of the other well-known London-based programs, but that is not recommended. What is recommended is really do a study. Remember, part of the purpose of a Marshall Scholarship is not just to offer American students this great opportunity to spend 2 years in the United Kingdom, but also to show off the deep and wide quality of the over 75 different colleges and universities in the United Kingdom. Next slide. Partnership schools. And this is a list. Don't try to write down all of these schools. This is a list that's easily available on their website. Partnership schools are schools that will, for some Marshall scholars that are studying on their campus, kick in for tuition for an extra 3rd year. So that idea of applying for a 3rd year, these are the schools that will partner with the Marshall Foundation to basically fund you for a 3rd year. It may or may not make sense. It is a way in which some people do try to get a PhD, a 3-year PhD in the United Kingdom. It's something that each student would have to be making their decision on. Is something that I can be talking with students on. Most Marshall applicants are going for 2 years, and then they are returning to the United States to either begin their last and their terminal degree, be it a law degree or a PhD in the United States, or they're beginning their career. Next slide. Selection process. Your deadline is September the 25th, Friday, 2020, for having your application submitted to this university. The application deadline was, since this slide was made, actually reduced so that we lost. By we, I mean both you and me, this university. So the deadline has been for years, the first week of October. It's not, it's the last week of September now. Oh well. But they will be having shortlist meetings, and the interviews will be taking place for the finalists over the first 2 weeks of November. And by the end of fall semester, we will know for this cycle who in the United States will be receiving one of the approximately 50 Marshall scholarships. Next slide. Got an interview process here. I talk and give extensive feedback about the interview process to those at UTD who have been named finalists. I also put them into contact with all of the finalists and all of the Truman Scholars from UTD. I've worked with all of them. And so a lot more information detailing the interview process once applicants have submitted their application and are in fact named finalist. But it is in fact a two-step process and an interview where they are talking with you. This year it's likely to be through a forum very much like this, unlike the face-to-face that they've been doing for decades. But there is an interview step for the finalists as well. Next slide. This just gives you a basic idea of where universities are coming from. Over 1/3 of all Marshall Scholars are coming from public state universities such as UTD. It really shows the broad democratization of the Marshall Scholarship over the course of the last 30 or 40 years. This is also all available on their website. Next slide. Preferred destinations are indeed Oxford and Cambridge. In terms of those selected last time, 37% were going to either Oxford or Cambridge for at least one of their 2 years as a Marshall Scholar, with another quarter of them going to one of the many universities in London. It's what the Marshall Scholarship calls the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle is a triangle made by Oxford, Cambridge, and London. Most people want to be in the Golden Triangle. If that's where the program that best fits your needs are, well, then you select that. But I heavily encourage you to look outside the Golden Triangle. Look beyond Oxford, Cambridge, and the universities within London, at the very least for one of your two choices. Next slide. Got a lot of resources. I would suggest you go onto their webpage, take a look at the resources, and of course, contact me. I don't have an email slide with my email, but it's really easy. My email is dougdow@utdallas.edu. DOUGDOW, no dot between my first and my last name. dougdow@utdallas.edu, and I am happy to be talking with you about your interest, about your engagements, about your choices. I'm already working with a number of our rising seniors on their Marshall Scholarship. I think that is our last slide. So if we can sort of put down, I am going to open things up for questions. Got about 10-15 minutes, so I'm happy to be taking questions. Ms. Kavanaugh just posted my email address, thank you, in the chat box, as well as the link to the Marshall Scholarship webpage. A lot of information. If you want to just do the little hand raise there, I will call on you. Just unmute yourself, ask your question, or if you want to type something in, feel free. I've overwhelmed everyone with information. Feel free to raise your hand or type into the chat box. What people are formulating, oh, here we got a question. Ashley asks, in the Fulbright info session, you mentioned having a portfolio of scholarships to apply for. How many scholarships do you think should be in the portfolio? Thank you. That is a great question, and that is going to be unique to each individual and each scholar. I have a lot of individuals that I work with who are applying for a Marshall Scholarship that are also applying for a Fulbright Scholarship. One thing that I would say, since we had a couple weeks ago been talking about a Fulbright, there's something called a United Kingdom Fulbright partnership, in which you can receive a single Fulbright grant to matriculate at a British university for 1 year. Typically, anyone that's applying for a Marshall, I say, unless you are wanting to apply for another type of Fulbright grant, you should also be applying for a Fulbright UK partnership. And so applying for a Fulbright and a Marshall together makes sense because they're both about leadership. Applying for a Fulbright scholarship and a Schwarzman scholarship, which is 1 year in China, often makes sense. There's a scholarship called a Mitchell Scholarship. All of this is available on our Distinguished Scholarships webpage on the Honors College website, which is 1 year in Ireland. So oftentimes your portfolio includes time spent in the British Isles, broadly defined. The question is one of fittedness. It is not unusual to be applying for up to, say, 4 or even 5 distinguished scholarships, along with having other plans. The one thing I will say, just to conclude your question, Ashley, distinguished scholarships can never be the only part of your portfolio. These are incredibly competitive, and part of what that means is that the selection rate is usually 1 scholar for every 5 applicants or less. So super duper competitive. You never only want to be applying for distinguished scholarships. You want your portfolio to be diversified and to have other things such as applying for jobs, internships, graduate or professional schools. Megan asked the question, you mentioned the Truman Scholarship. How comparable is the Marshall Scholarship to other scholarships like the Rhodes? Asking because I had a family member who was a Rhodes finalist. Truman Scholarship, which you can only apply for in your junior year, is for people who are going to have a career in public service. If you're not going to have a career in public service, you are not a fit for the Truman Scholarship. That means that a lot of people that apply for Truman also apply for a Marshall, but the Marshall has a much broader conception of career paths that do not necessarily include public service. Each one has their own sense of ideas of leadership. The Rhodes Scholarship is very much like a Marshall Scholarship, with the exception that it is not quite as egalitarian as the Marshall Scholarship. They are controlled by the estate trust of Cecil Rhodes, which sort of defines scholarship criteria in a very explicitly Edwardian way. And so their conception of leadership, of public service, and what they're looking for is not quite as broad or egalitarian as the Marshall Scholarship. I usually talk with people who are interested in applying for a Rhodes Scholarship. One thing I will say about the Rhodes Scholarship, there are 32 Rhodes Scholars named for U.S. citizens every year, and almost every year approximately 50% of them come from either one of the original Ivy League schools plus Stanford, Chicago, Johns Hopkins, or Duke. The desire to find the next generation of Rhodes Scholars broadly within the quite literally hundreds of fabulous universities in the United States, something that almost every other scholarship does. So a little less significant for the Rhodes Scholar. So that said, the university has had 3 Rhodes finalists in its history. We will have a Rhodes Scholar that is a alum of UTD, but unlike every other scholarship, that time has not yet come. I hope, Megan, that sort of answers your question. It's really a question of fittedness and about looking for what are each of the scholarships asking and looking for? How many Marshall Scholars has UTD had? UTD has had 3 Marshall Scholars. I should say that it was only with the establishment of my Office of Distinguished Scholarships back in 2007 that the university actually began to focus upon publicizing the Marshall and doing endorsements. But we've had 3 Marshall Scholars. Nancy Fairbanks was our last scholar. Other questions? The PowerPoint that I use to talk about the Marshall Scholarship is available on the Marshall Foundation's website, as is a lot of other information. We have been recording this workshop, so it will be available to you on the Honors College Distinguished Scholarship webpage within likely a couple of days. Um, oh, okay. So actually, Ms. Kavanaugh has posted in the chat room the actual PowerPoint that we were using here. So if you want to link to that, you can get it immediately as well. I'm going to make one more request for any questions that people may have. Like every scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship is not for everyone, but it is a terrific scholarship. It is looking for people literally in every field that want to do graduate study in the UK, who want to engage with the contemporary diverse communities of the United Kingdom, who are interested and curious about the world, and who are going to be, in their particular way, leaders within their field, defined in a variety of different ways. It's a great application. It is a longish application. It is also one in which the process of applying for a Marshall Scholarship is one in which you learn so much about yourself. It is really, I think, to that degree, an illuminating process to be going through. The Marshall Scholarship is a scholarship that I love to talk about. I think that it's a scholarship that has really grown and developed as both the US and the UK have grown and developed. So if you are interested, take a look, get some more information. And again, I am available. If you email me with questions, I will email you back, or I will arrange a time where you and I can have a phone conversation or a Teams conversation. With that, it is actually right at 2 o'clock. Usually I talk and talk and talk and go over time. So we are concluding right on time. I'm going to bring our Marshall Scholarship workshop to a close. I want to thank all of you for spending a part of your Tuesday afternoon with me, and look at your newsletter for more announcements. I will be offering workshops throughout the summer on a number of other distinguished scholarships, including the Schwarzman Scholarship, which I had name dropped just a couple of minutes ago. So with that, I'm going to bring things to a close. Ms. Kavanaugh, thank you again for being my tech assistant throughout this entire process. And we bring this to a close. Thank you all. Bye.